It's time to take 10 minutes for Torah with Rabbi Joel Finkelstein.
Welcome to our discussion, Parshat Balak, God's people always. I'd like to show in 10 different ways that Jewish people are God's people always in this Parshat Balak. Number one, by Moshe Tarragon of Yeshivat Har Etzion made a fascinating point. He said, why is it that in this Parsha, Bilam is supposed to curse the Jews, but God tells him he's not supposed to curse the Jews, only bless them. He goes anyway. And then the donkey stops him. The donkey turns around and he says, why are you hitting me? Aren't I the donkey you've been riding on your whole life? Have I ever endangered your life? All of a sudden you're beating me up? What's going on? How could you do that? And says Rabbi Tarragon, I never realized it. Maybe it's so brilliant, it's obvious. Now what? That the donkey is saying to him, there's a relationship here. You know the relationship that you have with your donkey? The loyalty that the donkey has had to you and the loyalty he expects from you? Well, God has that kind of loyalty with the Jewish people. And God will never exchange the loyalty that he has for us for another or for anyone else. Point number two. If some of the Jews sinned, so certainly some Jews can be punished. But if all the Jews sinned, he cannot wipe us all out. That doesn't work that way. There's no way. As a matter of fact, we say in the Haggadah that Lavan bikesh lakor zakol. Lavan tried to destroy us totally. And then we say that's what stood for our ancestors. When someone tries to destroy us totally, that's never going to work. Never going to work. Some of us, one thing, but all of us, that'll never work, because we turn to that pasuk. Point number three, Lo mastim v'lo gatim l'chalutam la'afer b'titam. God says at the end of Vayikra that God will never destroy us, will never despise us to destroy us, to annul his covenant with us. We have a covenant with God. Covenants you don't have covenant 1, covenant 2. There's a covenant with God, and God is faithful. God keeps his promise forever and forever. Number 4 relates to this point of all, some, not all. Bilam understood this, that you can't curse all the Jewish people, so he thought maybe Efes Katseu here. If he could just see some of the Jews, that would do it. As the Ramban points out, point number 5, maybe he saw that there were some righteous people in certain parts of the camp. He was trying to find a part of the camp where there weren't any righteous people. And sure, maybe he could curse that part. The Rabbi Soloveitchik points out that when it comes to an individual can only pray to God in a begging sort of way. And that's why we pray silently, sort of mumble. We approach God. We're very humble and mumble. We mumble and maybe you could heal me. Maybe you could forgive me. When we approach God as a community, when the Chazan representing all of the congregation, representing all the congregation of Israel all over the world, says his prayers, he says it with confidence, says it out loud, because he's not begging, he's demanding. A chazan, a leader of a congregation, can demand from God, because God has a covenant with us, and he cannot turn us away. God cannot turn away the tzibur, the congregation. Point number 6, God may see sins among us, and he may get mad. Sometimes gets mad at all the Jewish people. But it's not a rejection bet in our essence. It's only because of sin Y, X, Y, or Z. But he never rejects us in our essence. And perhaps number 8, this is what Bilam means, Lo hibit avim b'Yaakov, that he doesn't see iniquity in Israel. Of course, God sees iniquity in Israel, but he never sees it in our essence. He sees in our essence, basically, Jewish people are in a covenant with God. Basically, we're children of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And he doesn't look that carefully at us as a whole, because he cannot see us as fundamentally sinful people. Only b'mikra. It happens to be sometimes that we sin, but in our essence, God doesn't see iniquity in Jacob. Why? Why is God so kind to us? Because Shechina b'neihem. When God made a covenant with us, he became inextricably bound with the Jewish people. There's no escape of it. God, everyone knows that if the Jewish people, God forbid, are destroyed, it's the destruction of God's people. Everyone knows Jerusalem one day will be called God is there. We have a Mishkan, a tabernacle, in which we say God dwells in our midst. And when God is among your midst, God cannot destroy his own house. Matovu Alach Yaakov, how beautiful and wonderful and precious are our houses, says the Midrash. The houses, the Beit HaMikdash, the Mishkan, the tabernacle, the Batei Medrash, the schools of the Jewish people, the places where Jews study Torah and Talmud. Those are places where God rests. And God cannot be mad at a place where he rests. He cannot destroy his own home. The temple was destroyed, but the Jewish people were the true repository of God's presence. After all, it only takes a quorum of Jews, 10 men, and God's presence rests there. So surely God cannot reject the place of his presence. We are bound up with his identity. His enemies are our enemies. Our enemies are his enemies. There's no way around that. Finally, Bilam prays, Tiachviti kamo. I wish my future would be like his. The Jewish people are special because we have a destiny. We have a unique destiny, as Rabbi Soloveitchik pointed out. The Jewish destiny is different from others. The destiny of the Jewish people is for God to fulfill the covenant with the Jewish people and to restore us to Israel, and the glory of being at the center of the world where all nations will come to Jerusalem and Israel will be a light unto the nations. That's the future. That's the end. That's the goal. That's the destiny of the Jewish people. And therefore, Lo Yibit Avram Yaakov, God can't deal with the details. All right, so in particular year, particular moment, the Jews were sinful. That's not the key. The key is that one day the Jews are destined for great things, that they will be the repositories of God on this earth, and all nations will come and recognize there's one God, that God is the God of morality, the God of the Ten Commandments, the God of all the commandments of the Torah. And when everyone realizes that, the world will come to great salvation. How can God destroy such a world? How can God curse such a country, such a people? It cannot be done. We, Jewish people, are so bound with the destiny of God himself in this world, in this universe, that there can be no iniquity in Israel. Yes, there's sins, but not in the essence. In the essence, Jewish people are an eternal people that can never be utterly destroyed. We have a promise. God is very faithful. He will keep his promise. And one day, there will be a great destiny for the Jewish people. And with that, will bring great things to the entire world. Thank you for joining us here at the Baron Hirsch Congregation for a discussion of the Parsha and the holidays. And thanks to Jason Lefkowitz, our producer. Thank you.
This has been 10 Minutes for Torah with Rabbi Joel Finkelstein.